So one of the major barriers in ALS research is the lack of objective data. The disease itself is very variable. In fact, each patient has its own story regarding how the disease starts, how it progresses, and in what rate. Not only this, the measures for disease progression is very subjective. Actually, the only quantitative measure for ALS disease progression is the ALS-FRS pen and paper questionnaire, which is highly subjective both from patients and clinician perspectives. Not only this, the data itself and the questionnaire itself is done very infrequently. Since patients become more paralyzed and more immobilized, then the FRS is, the clinical visits becomes infrequent. And not only this, if you want to research disease manifestation, there is no single repository, there is no single database for studying disease manifestation. And in fact, each clinician has its own repository for his own patients. So you can see here an example of the ALS-FRS questionnaire, a pen and paper, as I say, very subjective pen and paper questionnaire. And we defined it as a barrier for future ALS cure. It's a barrier from clinical care, from patient's perspective, since it requires clinical visits, which is very infrequent as patients become paralyzed. And therefore, it delays important decisions about clinical intervention. And we know that in ALS, in most cases, clinical interventions are done too late. Also, it's a barrier for developing treatment, since the questionnaire is the primary outcome measure for ALS clinical trials. And since we don't have detailed and frequently sampled measurements for disease progression, it limits the ability to conduct efficient clinical trials and to identify new treatments. So our solution was to go behind the ALS-FRS questionnaire. And as said before, we believe that patients should be a part of our solution. The guidelines in developing this mobile analyzer were not to bring patients to the technology, but to bring the technology to the patients. And we decided to use a device that's available everywhere, anytime, without any requirement of other devices. Therefore, we decided to use the smartphone. So the mobile analyzer is a smartphone-based application that collects objective, continuous, comprehensive data of daily life functions of patients as they go on with their daily lives. The app is freely available to all ALS patients all over the world. So the application collects passive measurements like number and amount of phone calls and text, as well as it contains active tasks in different functions, like drawing, like tapping, and I'll go on all the tasks in the next few slides. Also, it contains the ALS-FRS questionnaire, but now it is self-reported and can be done every day or every week. And we use it for comparison to our tasks. And after collecting enough data, we are now starting to develop algorithms in order to identify disease patterns and subtypes, and also to develop recognition and timely alerts to clinicians. So how does the app work? How does data from patients is collected by their own smartphone, then aggregated in one single repository to be studied by clinicians, researchers, drug company, in order to get or to suggest better treatment and even a cure. So after downloading the app, which is freely, as I say, patients have to register the application. Registration is anonymously. However, there are some research critical information like gender, age, and date of onset that need to be filled in the app. Next step is the ALS-FRS questionnaire. The same subjective FDA-approved questionnaire, but now it is self-reported and also can be done every week instead of once, twice, 3 times a year. So it's much more frequent. Next are the active tasks. The drawing task asks patients to track several lines with the fingers, and it tests and records drawing accuracy and duration. Also, it examines fine motor skills and help identifying difficulties in holding a writing instrument. Speech tasks ask patients to read out loudly several sentences. Sentences were designed specially for the app by speech therapists in order to diagnose specific ALS speech difficulties. It examines the ability to speak clearly and identify pronunciation difficulties as it occurs. It also can indicate beginning of breathing difficulties. The mobility task asks patients to place the smartphone in the middle of their back and to walk in a straight line for several seconds. Mobility data is collected by the smartphone accelerometers without a requirement of other devices. Of course, it assesses gross motor skills and detects patients' steps and stability and examines his ability to walk. Tapping task asks patients to tap the screen with a finger or fingernail as many times as they can for several seconds. It examines patients' fine motor skills, including the ability to keep tapping in the same rate. Breathing tasks ask patients to repeat sounds like ah and oh, and to count out loud for as long as they can in one breath. It examines respiratory functions such as expiratory volume and vital capacity. Also, it can identify voice quality difficulties. The app also collects in the background passive data like the amount and duration of phone calls as well as length of text messages. A change in the ratio between those two measures can indicate disease progression in a specific direction. Like if some patients start texting instead of talking, it might suggest voice difficulties, and if someone started talking instead of texting, it may suggest fine motor skill difficulties. Next is a research step. After the data is collected anonymously and stored on a secure database, we are now in the step of start studying the data, while researchers all over the world are starting to develop algorithms in order to make sense of the disease, how the disease develops, what is the different subtypes of the disease. Also in the future, patients may share the data with their clinician in order to help them detect disease progression in its early stages and allow to offer better treatments. So what will be the outcome of this app? From patient perspectives, it allows the patient and the clinician to get more accurate and frequent information about patients' disease progression and to make critical decisions about clinical intervention and assistive technology. And as I say, in ALS, in most cases, clinical intervention are done too late. From clinical research perspective, the data collected will allow breaking the barriers of the disease. It will allow a unique information about clinical manifestation of ALS. And in fact, in just a few months, we're going to have the largest database of clinical manifestations of ALS. It also will allow more accurate and objective frequent assessment of a given treatment in the case of clinical study, which is the most important goal of a clinical trial. So just to summarize the impact part, from the individual patients, we suggest more responsive treatment and making more critical decisions about intervention in the right time. From the global impact and research, we are creating the largest database of clinical manifestations of ALS. It will allow researchers to recognize disease patterns and subtypes and reshape clinical trials as explained. So I want you to see this presentation as an open invitation to join us in our fight against ALS into the future.
Imagine a world without
Just a short
ALS.
video.
A world in which it is possible to confront this disease and beat it. Now is your historic opportunity to take part in the creation of this world and to change the future of our children. Introducing the ALS Mobile Analyzer, a novel mobile app developed by Prize4Life, an Israeli-based non-profit in cooperation with HP Enterprise and SAP Labs Israel. Now, for the first time, ALS patients across the world will be able to come together to create an advanced database which will pave the way to better our understanding of the disease and towards discovering a cure. So what is the ALS Mobile Analyzer? Each ALS patient has an individual story of the disease. Yet, in order to study the disease, researchers need to identify common clinical patterns. Without sufficient volume of objective data, this goal is practically impossible. But this obstacle no longer exists. The ALS Mobile Analyzer is a novel mobile application that enables the collection of quality data from ALS patients anywhere in the world, conveniently, quickly, and without even leaving the house. How does it work? Simply download the app, register anonymously, and conduct a simple functional test which includes a number of simple tasks such as drawing, typing, speaking, and moving. The more people join in, and the more often you repeat the test, the more the database will grow in volume and improve in quality, and we will move closer towards finding a cure. Do not let the disease dominate you. Join the fight and help us win it. The ALS Mobile Analyzer. Prize4Life.
So when I invited you to join us, there are some options that you can join. First of all, by spreading the app among patients. As we say, we believe each patient should be a part of the solution. Also, we are welcome any research collaboration in any field of clinical validation, algorithm development, and data analysis. Also, we're now at the stage of translating the app to different languages, so any collaboration will be welcome. Also, for speech therapists who can help us design the speech tasks in any language. And finally, I would like to thank our clinical advisor, Professor Merit Kutkovich from MGH, Professor Vivian Drory from Tel Aviv Sourasky Medical School, Mark Gottkind from the Hebrew University. We would like to thank the Office of Chief Scientist in Israel for their funding, our team from Prize4Life, all of our team, but especially Dr. Hagit Alon, Dr. Maya Bronfeld, and Shai Rishoni. And last but not least, I would like to thank our amazing team of volunteers, HP Enterprises, who developed the iOS version of the app, and SAP Lab Israel here in the photo, who developed and still developing the Android version. And finally, thank you for your attention.
We probably have time for one question. Colony, way in the back.
It's a great presentation, thank you.
Thanks.
We were curious as to who owns the data that you're collecting then. So is that made for public distribution, or is Prize4Life housing that data? How is that going to be shared?
Okay, we are maintaining the data, but we are about to share it to all researchers who want to study the disease. So that's the idea.
Great, thank you. I'd like to touch base with you later a little bit.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.